Greetings and welcome. We are in Senior English B. And now our project is to turn to another of the great Victorian poets, a man named Gerard Manley Hopkins. I'm with you on page 1086, 1087. Now, what I'm about to say is really important for the exam. I'm telling you in advance, some questions are going to be on the exam that treat very specifically information from page 1086. Very important that you're looking at page 1086 now. Very important that you're looking at some annotated notes. Very important that you're writing down at 2B, at the rhetorical section of your notes, the information under literary analysis. Do you see it there? I hope you're looking at it with me on page 1086. Literary analysis. You want to make sure that everything that's bold you have written down, starting with metrical verse and rhythm, then the notion of feet, finally the idea of iambic and trochaic, then the trimeter, tetrameter, and pentameter, as well as counterpoint rhythm and sprung rhythm. Okay? All of these are going to be elemental to the poetry of Hopkins. Let's go ahead and say it out loud. Hopkins is a great scientist of poetics. A scientist of poetics. He plays very intentional games with diction, with the words that are used, and the way in which those words create a certain kind of feeling through rhythm. Okay, so he's all about rhythm as well. This is hypercritical. Okay? The next thing that we want to do, because I know you can write some of that stuff down on your own and move through it, okay? By the way, here's the thing. You want to know that stuff well enough that if on an exam, a test question example is given, you're able to tell what kind of meter it is, all right? So notice you've got iambic, which is unstressed stress. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Right? The time, the time, the time, the time, the time. That's iambic. Remember, we played that game, remember, when we were playing around with Shakespeare's Sonnet 116, correct? But there is the opposite of that kind of meter, right? And the trochaic is the opposite, where we go stressed, unstressed, right? In grandeur, grandeur, grandeur. Do you hear it? So it's an opposite, as opposed to ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. It's ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. It's the opposite in terms of sound, which will create a different kind of rhythm in the poem. All right? The next thing I want to point out is the reading strategy that they employ right there on page 1086. As you read the two poems we're going to look at, God's Grandeur, Spring and Fall to a Young Child, these two poems we're going to spend a little bit of time with. You want to be paying attention to details in the author's biography and details in the author's works, which lead to an understanding of the author's beliefs. All right? Now, where are you going to get that kind of intel? You're going to get it on 1087. You're going to get it on 1087. Now, when you look at the picture on 1087, right away, what can you ascertain by virtue of that collar around his throat? Can you figure out what that means? He's got some religious background. You got it. So he's going to be a religious person, and so that's going to factor heavily in his poetry. Okay? He will have lots of devotional kinds of thoughts, both to God as well as nature. Okay? Finally, you've got some vocabulary words. I can guarantee you some of these words are going to end up on the exam. So you want to write those words down from 1086. You want to see how they're used in a poem. You want to try and use them yourself in some of your own writing so that you can memorize and understand these words. All right? All right, let's go to God's Grandeur now. I'm looking at page 1089. Surprisingly, I'm reading a background here. It's very fascinating. Surprisingly, when Hopkins died, I'm on 1089. None of his obituaries mentioned that he was a poet, and only a few friends were aware of this fact. One of these friends, Robert Bridges, an Oxford classmate, and later the British Poet Laureate. Bridges had corresponded with Hopkins and took an interest in his, this is an important word to write down at 2B, his experiments with rhythm. It was through Bridges' efforts that a volume of Hopkins' poetry was published for the first time in 1918. Today, Bridges is little known, but his once obscure friend, Hopkins, is really one of the most famous Victorian poets. It's quite an interesting story. When the cat dies, nobody recognizes him as an important poet. Today, you talk about Victorian poets, Hopkins' name gets mentioned way above the other people that we've been talking about, Kipling and some of the other guys. I mean, you know, it's an amazing story. Part of it is this experimentation with language. It's not just what he says, it's how he says it. So some of the notes you're going to be taking will be a 2B in terms of his experimental use of language. We're now going to turn to God's grandeur. It's a brief poem on 1089. We'll take a look at it now. And about this poem, we're going to try and answer 2 questions. You may want to write these questions down, as I am often want to do. I like you to focus on something as we read this thing. Question 1. What are these experiments with language that are so interesting? Okay. For example, can you identify whether we're working with iambic pentameter or trochaic pentameter or trochaic meter? Okay, which one? Iambic meter or trochaic meter? Which one? Right? Ba-bum, 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 or the opposite. Okay, and he's doing it intentionally. Question number 2. In what ways, and maybe you'll jot down 3 here, in what ways is this poem, God's grandeur, a celebration of not only God, but nature? Okay? In what ways is this poem not only a celebration of God, remember Hopkins is a religious man, but also his celebration of nature? And to that degree, he's going to remind us of earlier romantic poets that will have preceded him that we will be studying, Wordsworth especially. Okay? All right, here we go. We're going to listen to a professional reading now of God's grandeur. Just follow along.
God's Grandeur by Gerard Manley Hopkins. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, have trod, have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things, and though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with, bright wings.
Now let's take a look at this poem really quickly and point out a couple of interesting things. First of all, let's take a look at the stanza formation. Do you see it? Notice we've got a certain number of stanzas, 2, right? How many lines in this poem?
14.
How many lines in this poem? Okay. Wait a minute. Some of you are quickly now writing down a word at 2B. What word? You're right. Well done. Outstanding, Ms. Taylor, right? And if we're talking 14 lines, we're talking about what kind of poem? What is a 14-line poem? It is a sonnet. Good, let's write it down. So he's playing games with traditional form right away. We can see that right away. He's playing traditional games of sonnet writing. Okay? He says some interesting things, though, in regards to the message of this poem. Let's go there now at 2A. What does he say about nature? What is the most interesting thing he says about nature? And more particularly, nature and humans' relationship to nature. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. Means what? Humans, we don't walk barefoot on the ground anymore. We walk with shoes. And therefore we cannot feel what? Right, we can't feel the earth. What's the point he's making? What's the point that he's making? It's kind of an environmentalist point. What is it? What's he say about humans and their relationship to nature? Right, we're kind of finding ourselves, maybe because of technology or whatever, separate, right? As opposed to feeling closer and at one with nature. And yet for all this, notice the second stanza, nature is never spent. Who wins in the battle in the end? Yeah, Hopkins says, yeah, nature's going to win. Sooner or later, when humans have ruined the planet, nature's still going to be around. That's his point, right? There lives the dearest freshness deep down things, right? Finally, he finishes almost like a hymn or a song to God and to nature. The majestic grandeur of nature. Okay? All right, let's now turn to the second of these poems we're looking at on 1090, Spring and Fall to a Young Child. Now, there's a couple of things I need to tell you here, or this poem's not going to make as much sense to you, and you want to write this intel down. First of all, Hopkins is going to be, or the speaker of this poem, is going to be speaking to a young child. Speaking to a young child. The child is upset because Ruthie's tree has lost all its leaves. Only it ain't Ruthie's tree that the child is talking about. It's a forest called Golden Grove, which makes sense if you'll think about it. A grove of trees is a stand of trees. Golden, when do leaves turn golden color? Yeah, they do, don't they? In the fall. And of course, we know that in autumn, we call this term fall. In large measure, the leaves fall off the trees. She loves the leaves on the trees in the spring and in the summer. And then the child is sad when the leaves start falling off of all of the trees. The speaker of the poem will make an interesting observation about why she's really upset. What it is that really upsets her. She doesn't understand yet, but she will when she gets older. The question now, as we read this poem, is this question. You want to write it in your notes. What do you learn as you get older that you don't understand when you're younger about the meaning of leaves falling off a tree? I'll ask the question again so you can write it down. What do you understand as you get older that you do not understand when you are younger about the significance of leaves falling off of a tree? All right? So now let's pay attention to this one for a few seconds. We'll listen to this one, okay?
Spring and Fall to a Young Child by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Margaret, are you grieving over Golden Grove unleaving? Leaves, like the things of man, you with your fresh thoughts care for, can you? Ah, as the heart grows older, it will come to such sights colder by and by, nor spare a sigh, though worlds of wormwood leaf meal lie. And yet you will weep, and know why. Now no matter, child, the name, sorrow's springs are the same. Nor mouth had, no, nor mind expressed what heart heard of, ghost guessed. It is the blight man was born for. It is Margaret you mourn for.
Now, it's an interesting poem. It's an interesting poem because at first glance, readers often miss what's being said. But once we start breaking this poem down, we, are you ready for this? Like young Margaret, the child, come to a certain kind of understanding. Let's exegete quickly. He asks an interesting question. Little girl, Margaret, are you grieving, sad, over Golden Grove unleaving? Unleaving means what? The trees are losing their leaves, right? Why are you crying about this, he asks. He says, leaves, like the things of man, adults, you with your fresh thoughts care for, Can you? In other words, why are you so sad about all the leaves falling off the tree? Why is a child sad about the leaves falling off the trees? Why? Write it down. What would be the reason why a kid might be just a little bit upset or unhappy about all those leaves falling off of Ruthie's tree? Why come? The tree's no longer pretty, right? That is to say, oh, the trees are all now, they're kind of yucky looking. Before they were really pretty and beautiful, and now all the leaves are falling off of them. It's kind of not so pretty anymore. As the heart grows older, in other words, as you get older, it will come to such sights. What such sights? What such sights? Right, the trees losing all their leaves, colder by and by, nor spare a sigh, though whirls of wainwood leaf meal lie. In other words, he says, hey, Marguerite, there will come a point in your life when you'll look at a whole forest that's lost all of its leaves and you will not care about trees at all. Why come? As you get older. Why come? Keep reading. Sorrow's springs are the same. Now, I'm sorry, line 10. Now, no matter child the name, sorrow's springs are the same. Uh-oh, what's that mean? As we get older, we have different types of concerns. I mean, this is true. You know this as seniors. You watch these freshmen who think they're busy, and you just laugh at them, don't you? Right? Of course, you were freshmen once, and you thought you were busy, right? Only now, oh, I can say it this way. You're about 100 days away. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Now, you understand what your friends last year who were seniors were understanding. And they start to act kind of weird. When you're a junior, you notice, like, dude, what is wrong with you? You need to just chill out. Well, you could say that because you were a junior. And you knew next fall, after your junior year, you come back to this place and get to do this wretchedness all over again. Not so your senior pals last year. Now all of a sudden, guess what? You understand what they understood. The sorrows keep coming. They just have different names. When you're a child, you're sorrowful about what? Leaves falling off a tree. As you get older, you could care less about Ruthie's tree getting all its leaves now falling off. But there's other sorrows for you. There's other things to worry about. It is the essence of growing older. Now, no matter child the name, sorrow's springs are the same. Nor mouth had no, nor mind expressed, what heart heard of, ghost guessed. It is the blight man was born for. It is Marguerite you mourn for. Whoa, 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 what did I just read? What did we just read? He says, right now you're too young and stupid. You don't get it. But really, what you're sad about is not the leaves falling off the trees. What you're sad about is someday your leaves will fall off the tree. Whoa, 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 what does that mean? I'm not a tree. I don't have leaves. What's he talking about? What is it that adults understand every fall when we see the leaves fall off the trees? We're adults, and we start to get it. What is it we get? What do we understand that kids do not get? The leaves falling off the trees are a metaphor for what? It's all coming. It's all coming, right? Which is why some people love a Christmas tree so much, because we even call them what? Evergreen. Yeah. See, they don't have those leaves that fall off. Maybe I can kind of forget the fact that what? Sooner or later, your leaves have got to fall off. See how that works? See how that works? And he says it this way. Marguerite, you think you're crying because trees are losing their leaves. What you're really crying for, you don't yet understand, is yourself. What does he mean, yourself? What about yourself? Namely what? Now she's young, but soon she will, right? Soon she'll be old, right? And she'll have a different view, and she'll have different sorrows. Here's the funny thing. You can say to freshmen, you ain't got a clue what busy is. We're seniors, we understand. You don't know what stress is. I heard a senior say the other day, some sophomore was talking about how stressed out she was, and the senior was like, seriously? You don't even have a clue what stress is. Wait till your senior year. But wait a minute. There's people older than you who probably look at your stress and go, what? Really? Yeah. You think you're stressed? You just wait until you're in college, or you just wait until you're married, or you just wait until you're about to have your first kid, or you just wait until your parents start getting sick and you got to worry about doctor bill, or see how it goes? In other words, there's always something kind of coming, and as we get older, we inevitably will find ourselves kind of recognizing that leaves falling off the trees is a metaphor. Final comments at 3B. One or two of my students in the past have said, after reading this poem and understanding it, I guess I never will look at trees losing their leaves the same way again. In other words, I'll have a different kind of understanding of that metaphor that Hopkins is now playing with. Notice he worked from a very simple word picture. What was that word picture? Trees losing their leaves, right? To make a very interesting observation, go back now to the title and you can understand it. Spring and fall, to a young child. What other kind of child is there than a young child? See how it works? The minute we say old child, we understand though what that means, don't we? What is an old child? Yeah, we're all children. That is to say, we're all crying about something. When we're young, it's leaves falling off a tree. When we get older, it's leaves falling off a tree of a different kind, right? Of a different kind, of a different understanding. So Hopkins is playing interesting games with us. Also notice playing all kinds of interesting rhythms, right? Through words of worlds of Wayne would leaf me lie, and yet you will weep and know why. Notice the rhyming, the rhythms that are in play here. He's playing all kinds of games with us as he makes his observations. Okay, guys, there you go. An introduction to the poetry of Gerald Manley Hopkins.